I am now incredibly honored to be joined by Elisabeth Robinson, the mother of ours truly, Duncan Robinson, for a Mother's Day special. Elisabeth, we have talked for a while about having you on the podcast. Duncan and I have thrown the idea out of having both of our moms on, which we still should probably do at some point. But I figured while I'm running the show solo and he's away, what better opportunity to have you on so we can talk about him behind his back. So that's what I'm thinking we do today. But thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I am too. Davis Patrick Reed. I love that. I'm going to tell you everything else now.
I know. I love that he's introduced to the world my middle name. He gets some credit for starting to call me Dave. I never went by Dave before, but he and Harry and some of those Exeter guys started calling me Dave, which now my close friends call me. And I think in my head, Dave sounds like an old uncle or something. But now that I'm referred to as Dave, I think I just have to embrace it. So your son also gets some credit for that.
There you go. Let the credits roll.
So I wanna start with just him as a kid, because I met Duncan in 2010. We were 16-ish years old. We met at a basketball camp in Boston, and he was a very different person than he is now. He wasn't as tall. He wasn't as strong. He could barely run in a straight line. And this was him as a high schooler. But I imagine, and the stories I hear is that he was like this as a kid as well. But can you just help paint a little bit of a picture for me and for the audience of just what he was like as a kid? What stood out to you about his personality?
So he was very fun. He was fun to be around, and he was very happy a lot of times in a lot of different situations. He was pretty social. He liked a lot of people. He remembered people's names. He did, and he still does have a high EQ, IQ kind of thing. He was kind of a huckleberry boy. He loved to go into the woods and learn stories about how raccoons got their mask and learn how to make a fire without any matches. And he really loved to be out in the woods. And there was programs that did that, outback programs kind of thing. So he did that. He was very athletic. He loved every sport. He was pretty brave as a kid because he was the last of three. So I remember one time waking up at 6 a.m. after we had been at the top of Sugarloaf, which is a huge mountain, and Duncan was 3. And I was like, oh my gosh, we just took Duncan to the top of Sugarloaf, and he skied all the way down without a peep. He just, did it. So he was very willing to be part of the posse of the 5 of us, and had fun doing it. He was great. He also had a brother and a sister who really took care of him. They really liked him. And so it was a group ethos that we had about being funny with each other, calling each other out on each other's stuff, and having fun with each other, and kind of getting where each other's at and filling in the gaps and stuff like that. So he didn't have tyrannical older brother and sister. He had very nurturing. Eli gave him some grief, but Marta was like always taking care of Duncan. So he had that. And I would say that that responsibility of theirs, I think you and he are similar in that you're both very reliable and responsible and real. And so I think he adopted that from the whole ethos of our family, I would say.
I always, seeing the way that he interacts with Marta and with Eli, it always made me envious and wanting older siblings, because it's just the family dynamic is just so special. And I remember some times out in the vineyard, in Martha's vineyard, where we're playing, maybe it's bananagrams or cards or some game, maybe it's charades, and there's a competitiveness that is in the Robinson family that is hard to match. And so I think that also fosters this athletic, it's not surprising that Duncan found a career in sports, being raised in the competitive environment that was in the Robinson household.
Yes, we are all competitive, and I'm probably one of the most competitive in a quiet way, but I like my win, I like my W kind of thing.
So that's something he gets from you.
Yeah, his father was is very competitive too, but probably I'm a little bit more. I would say aggressively competitive. I would say maybe to a fault.
Well, I think Duncan can be competitive to a fault too, and that was one of the first things that jumped out to me about him, whether it was on the basketball court or, like I said, a card game or a video game. It was apparent immediately how badly he wanted to win. And I've heard
Or
some
an argument.
and especially an argument, especially an
An argument.
argument.
I always called him our litigator because he would never ever back down of being wrong. And if he was wrong, he'd say, okay, well, you can be right, but I can also be right. He would never ever give in for being wrong.
Well, and I think it could get to the point where it was a problem. And I've heard some stories about him as a young kid on the basketball court specifically, where when he was wrong or if something went awry, he would sulk and he would complain with refs and he would, cross a line sometimes and you would have none of it. He was like, you were not standing for it.
No, I was sort of the moral, ethical police with him about that. Like, in fact, one time he was on the Little League mound, doing his pitching, and he was a good pitcher, but he would, if he got a ball or and two balls, he'd start pouting on the mound, and I was mortified, and I was like, this cannot go on. So I took a video of him doing it. And I took him home right after that game. And I said, we are watching you on the mound. And so we did. And he suddenly got it. He suddenly saw how much he's wasting everybody else's time by pouting and having a fit and throwing his hat or doing whatever he was doing. And I was like, you are not doing this again. And he did. He cleaned up his act quite a bit. So he was good like that.
It's a couple of takeaways from that story. One, I think every kid does that. I definitely did. And I remember, I have vivid memories of, striking out in Little League baseball and then going into the dugout and crying and just being so mad and throwing my helmet. And most of my friends and teammates had those moments also. So I think for you as a parent to think, I don't know if it ever would have crossed my parents' mind to film me and show me what it looks like. Because I think once you see yourself doing it, it's easy, even as a kid, to understand that, oh, I look ridiculous. But for you to be aware that that would work, I think is really impressive. Is it true that you also made him take a manners camp or go to a manners camp to learn how to be a better behaved kid?
I did. It wasn't more the behavior. It was more like the yes, Miss Manners. And it was a series of 2 dinners. And what I did is I got like 8 eighth graders and eighth grade girls. And the 16 of them went to this restaurant to learn manners. The fork is on this side and that side, and you pass the bread first, all that kind of stuff. And so then the 16 mothers, we all went out to dinner. It was during a big game. It was during some sort of, I don't know, it was a pennant game or maybe the Celtics ending game or something really big. So there were not cell phones at the time. Or I didn't let Duncan have a cell phone, but his friends had one. And so they were texting their fathers about what was happening during this game and stuff. It was really funny. But they had to dress up. They had to get in the coat and tie, and they had to go, be presentable and stuff.
So Duncan has talked a lot on this podcast about how big of a Celtics fan he was as a kid. And yes, I did a little research with some people in the family, and the word on the street is that this was 2008 when the Celtics won the championship, and this was the Eastern Conference Finals Game 7. And Duncan, there's nothing Duncan cares more about in his life at this point, but he had to go to, you said it was Miss Manners. He had to go to Miss Manners and miss the game because he had to learn how to behave at a dinner with his mother.
I know, that's total torture. I understand it. But you know what? I got to give him credit. He did it. He went with all his friends. They all complained. The girls loved it. The girls loved being there with all those handsome young 8th grade boys and all that. They loved it. But I did make them do that.
It's so indicative of who he is, though, and who you are. I mean, just basketball was always the priority. He always wanted to chase that dream. You always supported it. But there were other priorities that needed to be there as well. One of which was learning how to become a well mannered boy. But he's told, I wanted to ask you about, because he's talked on the podcast also about his technical at the Christmas Day tournament as a kid. He got a technical foul, and apparently
Oh,
the drive home with you was not a pretty one because, again, like look, Duncan is one of the more behaved people that I know, or as a kid was. He's always a very mature, very responsible, very smart kid. But we all have weak moments. So when he gets a technical as a kid, what's your messaging to him in that car ride home?
oh, messaging. I wouldn't call it messaging. I would call ignoring and then saying, "This is not going to happen again. Let's trust me here. It is not going to happen again." So not a lot of discussion, more of just like clear boundaries. This is what it looked like. This is how you came across. These are adults that are giving their time during Sunday morning at a tournament. You're also representing your team wrong, that whole kind of thing. So another a big thing was there was another kid on his brother's age that would always take off he was the star player, and he would always take off his shoes before the end of the game because the scrubs would come in and finish up the game because they were ahead so far and stuff. And I would be livid, livid. And he's not even my kid. He was in high school. And I would say to my kids, don't you ever let me see you take off your shoes before the end of the game. What is that? What message is that, kind of thing? So I was very into those kind of, lessons.
Yeah. Well, again, it's so apparent just in the way that Duncan has always handled himself well on the basketball court, and I'm now learning that most of that credit, it sounds like, is goes to you. Yes, he's a good kid. I think he probably always had it in him, but you were on top of it as he was as grown up. So I'm also curious. Not only were you prioritizing his behavior and his manners as you should have, but he, at least when I met him, because I met him when he was in high school, and he was so focused on basketball. He was so driven. I remember thinking I worked hard in Kansas growing up, and then meeting him and Harry and some of these other guys at Exeter, Chris Braley, and their work ethic was just, it blew me away. It made me sort of reevaluate how much I wanted it, how much I wanted to be a, a really good basketball player, a good college basketball player. I don't know if I ever had my sights on the NBA or playing professionally, but they just got after it at a different pace. Was that something that he always had, even back before? Because when I met him, he was a good basketball player. But I know that there was a stretch there where he wasn't one of the best. I mean, he didn't even play a lot on his high school team early on. But did he always have that fire? Was that always apparent?
Yes, he is a very much of a Taurus. He's very stubborn. And the work ethic, I think they each fed each other with work ethic. I remember he and Harry sometimes would get up at 3 a.m. to make a 5 o'clock workout in Boston. They could only work out from 5 to 6 or something ridiculous like that. I mean, literally, they just gotten their licenses. It wasn't that they were, I mean, maybe they were 18 or something, but they would get up and do that and then study the game and very much into it. When he was younger, I made him play all the sports because I wanted his first of all, it's better for the body. If you play a bunch I don't want him to have Tommy John surgery,
Right.
at age whatever. But also the IQ of the court is so much higher if you play soccer and then you play lacrosse and then you play baseball and then you play basketball. Basketball was definitely always his sport, but he was really good at sports, and I really wanted him to have a melange of different IQs to go into the basketball court with. But then when you met him, he was just basketball. It was just goodbye everything else,
Yeah,
kind of
it
thing.
def it really was. And I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, you're obviously an incredibly supportive mother. You would do anything for Duncan. But are there any points along the journey where you're like, hey, I need you to focus more on school, or I need you to think more about what you're going to do after basketball? Or was it always just he was so driven on it? Because I remember there were times where my parents were incredibly supportive, and I loved basketball more than anything else too. But to their credit, because I'm grateful for this, there were times where my dad would be like, homework first, or like school first, or just making sure that other priorities were in line. Obviously, it's worked out for Duncan. He's now, playing professionally. It's become his career. But were there points where, because there had to be moments where that seemed unrealistic and you thought maybe he should be spending time on other things? Or did you ever try to steer him away from spending so much time on basketball?
Well, I'm very lucky in that Duncan did not need to be told to get his homework done. He just did it. He had such a good, he would do it during the day at a, like a break between classes or whatever. He had it down how to do it. Was he a straight A student all the time? No. Did I accept that? I was totally fine with that. I wanted him to be a whole child and not just this brainiac person that has no other personality to him kind of thing. With the basketball thing, I felt like it was like imprinting. If you could do one thing passionately and do it well, what's your next thing? So I felt like I wasn't threatened by his commitment to basketball because I saw him, this passion and this intelligence and his body, everything was just getting fed. So it did not concern me that he was so involved with, or myopic on basketball. To me, it was more just like he was really into something and it would imprint him to anything else he wanted to do, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes sense. I think, yeah, that's beautiful in a way. And then it all works out, right? He goes to Williams, he gets into, I remember my goal was always like, all right, let's use basketball to sneak into as good of a school as possible. It's like I was a good student. I prioritized school, but I wouldn't have had the chance to go to Phillips Exeter or Wesleyan if it weren't for basketball. I wouldn't even known what those schools were. For Duncan, it was obviously a little bit different because growing up in New England, you're aware of those schools. But then it feels like it all works out. He gets to Williams, one of the best schools in the country. He's playing basketball. Not only is he playing, but he's playing a lot. He's one of the best players on the team. They go to the national championship. It has to, in that moment, feel like, okay, it all worked out. Like everything's worth it. If the story would have ended there, it would have been great.
Yeah, it totally would have been great. And it was. And then Mike Maker decided that he wasn't going to come back. And then Duncan, he was way ahead of me on that one. He knew exactly what was going to happen. And we talked to so many coaches within 2 weeks' time. And Duncan navigated that so beautifully and with such maturity. I remember we were all on the vineyard and he kept going out to the car to talk to all these different coaches and stuff. And it was like really impressive about, he'd come back and I go, so what'd they say? And then some coaches were calling me and some of them were, and then Harry, Marta, and I, and Duncan would be up in the room, saying, okay, what's this? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Kind of being his sounding board for what was going to happen next and stuff. But I want to say the first time I met you, it was early fall, Exeter. Duncan, we were going to take Duncan out to lunch, and you came along. He goes, "Can Davis come?" And I go, "Great!" And you were just so wonderful that you are, and so just this beautiful smile. And I go, "So where are you from?" And he said, "Kansas." I go, "Kansas?" I go, "How did you end up here?" And he goes, "I'm not really sure." And I go, "Does anybody in Kansas know anything about PG years?" And you go, "Not a clue."
Yeah, I had no idea. And I remember that lunch. I remember meeting you for the first time. And that year was so awesome in retrospect. But in the moment, I was so overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was getting into. You grow up in Kansas, like you just said. I had no idea what a prep school was, what a post-grad year was. I went to a public high school where I wore sweatpants and a t-shirt to class every day and had my friends and drove around. And, my parents gave me the freedom to do what I wanted to. And then I found myself at Phillips Exeter where we're wearing a tie to class every day. We have a curfew at 10 p.m. I'm halfway across the country away from my family. All my friends from back home are in college. I'm at this prep school with 13 and 14-year-olds. I'm still at a high school. And I remember having moments of serious doubt of like, what am I doing here? Like, what did I
Yeah.
do? But
Yeah.
you were 20 minutes down the road and you welcomed us to the house whenever we wanted to come. We would go spend the weekends with you. You would bring us food and you would you would take us around the city and you would take us out to dinners, and it just made the process so much easier. So I'm sure that I've thanked you before, but it is, I can't imagine what that year would have been like without you, because seriously, I think build like the role you played in helping build that community of the Exeter guys, that, those are still my best friends. I think a lot of that credit is because we could escape campus and the wildness that was Phillips Exeter and go have hangouts at the weekend at your house. And it just brought us so much closer together.
Well, your group was like divine intervention. It was like everything came together. Coach Chilton just, I don't know, it just was this beautiful thing that just kept blooming. And you guys were like the Huckleberry Boys. Everybody loved you. Everybody respected you. You lived up to their respect. You helped female athletes. You worked with them. You worked with so many coaches still come to Duncan's games, if they're in New York
Yeah.
City, even. It's just the group of you, it was like that calculus where you were more than just the sum of your parts.
Yeah.
It was a very special year for all of you. And you won that championship for the first time in how many years? Like 70
Yeah.
years or something.
It was a magical year. I mean, it really was. And honestly, I think credit goes to Harry, Duncan, and Chris, a lot of it, because they knew each other. They were already sort of, really tight friends, and they'd played AAU together. So they were sort of the nucleus. I remember right when we showed up, Harry was sort of like took the reins as the captain, and Duncan and Chris were right behind. Chris had already been a year at Exeter. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It was a magical year. It was a group that was so special. And like I said, those guys are still my best friends to this day. We still have our Exeter group chat where we're, firing off texts to each other and checking in on each other, making sure everything's okay. So that year was amazing. Again, then Duncan goes to Williams. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm fascinated by that year after Williams, the decision to transfer to Michigan. And like you said, Duncan, I think, was quicker to get to that than you were, because I remember there were times where you, and rightfully so, by the way, I mean, it was a huge jump, seemed a little more hesitant about him leaving. Again, such a perfect situation that was at Williams. It was, again, amazing school, really good basketball. Duncan had the chance to play and play a lot. And so deciding to change things, regardless of what the school was that he was ending up deciding to go to, was a huge risk because the situation was so good at Williams. How long did it take for you to kind of wrap your head around, okay, this is happening, and I'm just, full support. Whatever Duncan wants to do is what he's going to do?
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of phone calls, and I did get pretty the cream that rose to the top were the coaches that actually called me too and told me about their program. And Beeline was great. They were all great, all D1 schools. The one from Omaha said, "Mrs. Robinson, have you ever been to Omaha?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "You're going to love Omaha." He said, "I'm sure I will." So anyway, we went on these trips. But when we were in Michigan, Beeline brought out the whole group, all 7 assistant coaches. They were all wonderful. They kept talking to me and making me part of the, decision and stuff. And we would be in the elevator. That was the only time that we would have alone time. And I remember going up the elevator going, "What do you think?" And he goes, "Michigan is, awesome." He goes, "I don't think I can say no to Michigan." And so, yes, it was a definite risk. A huge risk, but they made Duncan feel like he was like, in fact, one assistant coach said to me, "I've seen Coach Beeline have a lot of recruits come through here, and all of us are sometimes scratching our head or thinking about something, because I've never seen all assistant coaches totally on board with Duncan." He goes, "We really, really, really want him." And that, to me, that statement, he didn't have to say that to me, and I felt it. And so Duncan he signed up, and it was very scary, but it was very exciting.
Yeah.
It was believing in himself.
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. That's exactly what it was. I have a question, but before we get to that, is it true that on the visit to Michigan, you guys were touring the practice facility and you asked how they got the bleachers in for the games?
Yeah. Um, my yeah, my D1 IQ is not very high.
Understandably, by the way, because I had the opposite experience, which is funny because growing up in Kansas, my parents went to the University of Kansas. I grew up going to Allen Fieldhouse to watch the Jayhawks play, and that was my idea of college basketball. So I had the opposite experience where we would go when we were at Exeter, we would go to some of these colleges and play games at Dartmouth or Williams, or the first time I went to Wesleyan. It was such a shock to me. It was such a different experience. So it's one of my favorite stories is that,
Yeah.
because by the way, if that's what you're used to, if that's what you're aware of, that the Michigan practice facility looks like a Division III basketball gym. It's a very understandable mistake, but it's very, I can imagine from the coach's perspective being like, no, what are you talking about? No, we'll go show you Chrysler here in a second. You'll be blown away.
Yeah. There were these boxes next to every hoop, and it would tell you the degree of your arc. It would speak it out. And I'm like looking at these boxes and looking at the arc of the whatever. And I was just blown away by that. And that was in the practice facility.
Yeah.
So I just thought
it's amazing. It's, Duncan, it was apparent at Williams how good of a basketball player he was. And who knows if you rewrote the story and he stayed at Williams, who knows where he ends up? Maybe he still finds his way to the NBA. But the difference in resources that you get when you go from a really good, really high level Division III program to a really good, really high level Division I program are just night and day. Do you have memories of like your first times seeing that, whether it was the tour at Michigan that you went on or coming to watch your first game that Duncan was playing in, just being sort of blown away by the magnitude of it all? Our next partner has a product that I have told you guys repeatedly, and I mean it, I use every day. Athletic Greens. I take AG1 because it gives me the kick I need in the morning. It's got everything I need. I don't waste any time. I simply mix it with a cup of water, guzzle it down to start the day before I eat anything else, and all of a sudden, my day is way more likely to be fantastic because I now know I've taken care of my gut health. I'm going to have more energy. I'm going to optimize my immune system, and I don't have to take pills or vitamins. Actually, when I was a kid, I couldn't swallow pills or vitamins. I had to try to crush them up, put them in my applesauce. I'm not 100% sure that I could swallow pills regularly now if I needed to. With AG1, I don't have to worry about it. I just mix it in a glass of water. It tastes delicious, and I can drink it right down. It's like I'm just having a nice treat in the morning. I've actually let it sort of replace my coffee. I didn't love that I was developing a little bit of a coffee dependency. And I'm telling you, the Athletic Greens has sort of taken away that urge too, because I'm now starting my morning with AG1 instead of a cup of coffee. And then by the time that I've finished it, I'm good to go. My day has started. And I've absorbed 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to make sure that my day started right. So check this out. If you're interested in checking out AG1 Athletic Greens, we're going to make it easy for you because they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/longshot. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/longshot to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. I've told you guys this before, but it is worth mentioning again. When I was rocking a suit on my wedding day, it was Indochino. And let me tell you, I don't know if I ever felt sexier. It fit me perfectly because that's what they do. It's custom fit. I remember walking into the shop in Kansas City. They gave me the full experience. It smelled good in there. They had all the materials laid out for me, all the different colors. I got to hand make my suit. It's like, what more can you ask for? And here's the thing. They don't just do suits. They do casual wear. They do nice pants. They do nice shirts. They've got accessories, everything you need to feel your best. And I'm telling you, I can't stress it enough. It was like this thing was painted on me. I got the exact color I wanted. It felt comfortable. It was lightweight. I got married in August, so it's very hot in Kansas City in August, but this thing kept me cool and I looked cool. So it was like, what more can you ask for? If you've got a big day coming up, getting the perfect look is no big deal with Indochino. Get $50 off any purchase of $3.99 or more by using promo code LS at Indochino.com. That's $50 off a purchase of $3.99 or more at Indochino.com. Promo code LS.
Completely. Even just the nutrition program and going into the facility and seeing all the nutrition, manifested in this incredible, the snack room or whatever it is. And also reviewing the film. And then they have all these beautiful seats all around this huge screen to review the films, and everything was just state of the art. Or even the physical therapy place where they had the ice baths and stuff like that. That was just inspiring and incredible. The whole thing, and even just have to get into the gym to have a key. Like you can't just walk into the gym. You have to have a key, and there's security everywhere. Just all that.
No, it is. It's things that maybe you would, in retrospect, like it makes sense, but you're right. Like at Wesleyan, anyone could walk into the gym. I remember there were times where we'd have practice and we'd have to kick kids off the court because they'd be in there shooting around. It's like these are not problems you run into at a high major Division I college. So then after Michigan, Duncan has a similar decision to make, just like the Wesleyan or the Williams Michigan transfer decision. He has another decision where signing an agent is sort of two options. We can go with the guy who prioritizes or has more relationships in the NBA, and that might be a little bit of a stretch, or we can go with the guy who has more connections overseas, which seems more realistic. And Duncan had to decide, does he want to take this leap to try to break into the NBA or go the safer route with the guy who could probably get him a better job overseas? What was your advice to him in that moment, in that decision?
So just a little backstory there. We were at a Big Ten tournament, which we had won, surprisingly. I think it was after the plane crash, that one. And one agent came up to me and he goes, Mrs. Robinson, and I said, yeah. And he goes, this is my card. He goes, I'd be interested in talking to Duncan about, there's certain rules that they can't talk to him, or they can, or whatever. They can't buy them coffee or something like that. He goes, but and I said, oh, okay. And I just took his card and he goes, it's Europe, you know that, right? And I go, yeah, whatever. I have no agenda here in this conversation. So I said, yeah. So, but then Duncan, again, like I'm talking about that imprinting, he had done that parlay from Williams and really he navigated that. I mean, I was supportive and I was asking questions and honing his progress through that, but he was doing it. And then when he had met Glue found him, and his agent Jason Glushon, shout out to him. He is incredible. I mean, first of all, he's a boutique. We were at UCLA, and this is when Duncan had just stopped starting for Michigan. So it was like his junior year. Glue sat with Marta and I, Duncan's sister, for 2 or 3 hours, telling us all about his job and what he did and what his job was. He didn't have to do that. I mean, we're just, we're just armed people, we're not Duncan. And he did that. And between Duncan and Glue, they taught us what was going to happen. It wasn't, I mean, again, I was just sort of like, okay, that sounds good. And I think maybe inspiring to Duncan was having to tell us what he was doing. So he sort of honed his speech or his philosophy around why he was doing what he was doing. But Glue was amazing, and Duncan was great to see. That's one thing that Duncan does have. He has a great sense of he has a great IQ of people. He loves people, and he knows who to trust and who not to trust. And he's had all sorts of friends over the years, and still has them, because he has a really good interrelational relationship with a lot of people. So
yeah, I think that you deserve more credit probably than you're giving yourself, because yes, Duncan made those decisions, and Duncan decided to transfer from Williams, and he navigated that, and he went with glue and took that gamble on himself to, let's go with the agent who could help me get into the NBA, even if it's a long shot. Let's take the chance. But I think it's rare that a parent is just supportive, that they don't have an agenda or, aren't, pushing one way or the other. And you were always just supportive. And even at Exeter, it's like you never missed a game. You were always there. And like I said,
Oh yeah.
we would escape to your house for the weekend. It's like you were always there. You were supportive. And that, I think, it just goes, it makes things so much easier as a kid trying to navigate the world. Like when you have that parent that's just supportive, is there to, regardless of what the decision is, you're going to be there.
Well, he's easy to support, and all my kids are. And I was lucky. I had 3 kids that we got along. We had fun, and we were all. I mean, I'm not funny, but they're funny, and I appreciate their funny kind of thing.
I wouldn't say
so
that.
we really had a lot of fun. And there was something I was going to say about that. Yeah. So anyway, it was just easy to support him. I mean, and I know I was going to say this Mother's Day thing. I always am sort of flabbergasted by this Mother's Day thing, because the best thing in the world is to be a mother. Like, why are you celebrating me as a mother when we should have Kids Day or something like that? And it's the most fulfilling thing. And especially, I know your parents feel the same way, especially with the kids that we have. They're just so fun, and they're so respectful. And it's just so nice to live life through their eyes as well as yours. So it's great.
I think the least that we as kids can do is take one day out of the year to appreciate our mothers more than usual. We should do it every day. But if we should, we'll stamp one day on the calendar to make sure that appreciation is felt. All right, last question for you. You're on your lunch break, by the way. You are foregoing lunch to talk to me, so I want to make sure you have time to eat. But before I let you go, I am curious. This is the last question I have for you. When you look back on Duncan's journey playing basketball, none of us ever thought that it would get to this point, but here we are. What makes you proudest about who he is today as a person, and just how he's, traveled this journey? When you look back, if you had to pick one thing, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but what about him as a mother makes you proudest?
I would say that just one thing. I think his work ethic got him there, but I think that his true respect for other people and himself, probably, that, and his big heart with all that. So I would say his ethos, his integrity,
Yep.
and his intelligence, all melded into one kind of thing.
I mean, you picked like 7 things, but I'll let that
Totally
answer.
did.
I'll let that answer fly. No, it's true. I mean, he's a special kid. And again, I think a lot of that credit goes to the home he grew up in, and his siblings and his parents and the people that were around him. You mentioned when you met Glue, it was right after Duncan had moved to the bench at Michigan. And, I have people, because, he's had this playoff run where there are games where he's not playing. There are games where he's not playing as much as he wants to be playing. And I have people reaching out to me like, what's going on? How's he handling this? Is he doing okay? And I tell people, this is nothing new. He's been here. He is resilient. He is, like you said, he's got respect for himself. He knows who he is. And so, this is just another part of the journey, right? Like, this is the Long Shot podcast. He's been a long shot his entire life. So this is nothing, right? Like, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
He's got that resilience, and a lot of that comes from you.
Oh, well, he's a true professional, and he's a can-do kid. He's going to do it. He's going to study it. He's going to figure out where the slips and the cracks are, and he's going to go in through there, and he's going to come out above. He just keeps doing it, and I love him for it. And it's really an honor to watch this ride and to watch him bloom into the adult that he is, the professional adult that he is.
Yep.
So,
It's been an honor for me to watch it too. I'm just hanging on to his coattails now. I'm just latched on as he continues to rise. I'm trying to just go up there with him. So it's been a blast. Elisabeth, thank you so much. Seriously, this was
oh, thank
awesome.
you.
This was one that I was most looking forward to. I appreciate you very much. Thanks for coming on. Please go eat your lunch. Get back to. I hope I didn't. I hope I saved you like 20 minutes for you to put something down before you have to get back to work.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate your parents too. Happy Mother's Day to Jenny.
Yes. Happy Mother's Day, Mama.
All right. Thank you so much. Take
Thanks.
care.